Hey y'all, it's Melissa. I'm the writer of the blog Melly Sews, and I design blank slate patterns. Today's project is going to be this pillowcase style pajama top. We've got a gathered neckline in the front and the back, this tie shoulder detail, and it can be made from a vintage sheet as I use, vintage pillowcase, or any other type of fabric you'd like. In order to make this, you're going to need to get the pattern for the top and go ahead and cut that out. So if you can see the links on the screen, I've got a link right up here for the pattern download, or you can look down in the description for the blog post with links, and it's going to have all the details you need for you. So go ahead, get that pattern, cut out your fabric, and then I will meet you back here at the sewing machine to put this together. So I've got my top, front, and back cut out. We're also going to be using both double fold and single fold bias tape. So the difference between double fold and single fold bias tape, in case you didn't know, double fold bias tape is folded twice. So the raw edges are folded in, and then the bias tape is folded again, and that gets you the double fold. Single fold bias tape is folded once. It's got just the two raw edges folded in. And if you fold single fold bias tape, again, it becomes double fold. So what I have is 1/2 inch wide single fold and 1/2 inch wide double fold bias tape. We will be using both of these. The first step to making this top is going to be to place the two pieces right sides together, and we are going to be sewing down the side seams. There we go. So I want to sew this side edge and this side edge together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then I will meet you back at the camera and we'll talk about what the next step is. So I've sewn the side seams here, and I've gone ahead and I have finished these side seams with my serger or overlock machine. Now if you don't have a serger, there are other options. You don't need one to finish the side seams. You can do French seams, you could do flat felled seams, you could use pinking shears. All of these options, as well as a faux overlock stitch that's done with a regular sewing machine, those are all explained. There's a link in the description down below that will show you how to do these other kinds of seam finishes. So choose the one you want, finish these side seam edges. Once that's finished, you're going to open your top so that you are looking at the armhole. This right here is the armhole. And what you're going to do now is you're going to be using the single fold bias tape to finish this edge. So we actually want to work on the right side of this top, and we're going to unfold the single fold bias tape, and we're going to pin it right along that edge, the armhole edge, with the right sides together. So we'll just pin it all along there. And then after we have this whole thing pinned out like this, you're going to stitch right in that crease line that is closest to the raw edge of the fabric. So let me go ahead and get this done, and then I will show you what this looks like when it is stitched. So I've stitched all along this crease line that is closest to the raw edge of the fabric. After you've done that, you're going to turn your top wrong side out. And then what we want to do is we want to flip this right along the seam line. So there's the seam line, and pin it so that it lays to the inside of the garment. And you'll notice how that encases all of the raw edges. So the raw edges of the bias tape and the raw edges of the armhole there get stuck inside of that casing. Once that's pinned in place, you're going to stitch along the folded edge here And when you finish that, here's what it'll look like. I've gone ahead and done the other side here. So this is the inside of that armhole, and you can see that I've stitched this into place all along the edges. The next step, once we've got those two armholes stitched in place, is going to be to apply the same type of finish here on top of the neck edge line, with one exception. So we're going to take the single fold bias tape again, and we will be again unfolding it and pinning it. However, at the very edge here, when you start, you want to turn the raw edge of your bias tape up like that. And then we'll pin along that edge, and on the other end, you'll do the same thing. You'll turn the end in, and then you'll stitch along that line. What that's going to do is it's going to give you this folded and not raw edge, and it's going to help create the neck casing that we're going to be threading the straps through. So let me go ahead and pin and stitch this, and then we'll show you what this looks like again. So I've stitched the bias tape in place along the front and back neckline, and I've got those edges folded in. And then this is very similar to what we did with the armholes. We're going to fold those edges in and then fold that down, and we'll sew just along the bottom edge so that the bias tape forms a casing, and that casing is what we will thread our ties through. So once you've got this all folded into place and stitched down, I went ahead and I did the other side, so let me show you what that looks like. This is the completed neckline edge. This is the wrong side of it, and as you can see, let me borrow my pencil here to show you, you can actually stick things inside that casing, and we will use that with the double fold bias tape to thread it through. Let me get the back edge stitched here, and then I'm going to add a detail to the front edge of the shirt before I start threading casing. I want to add a little bit of this lace. So what I'm going to do is I'll pin this right along, let's see how, I think I like it that way. But what I want to make sure to do is pin it right along the stitching line that I've already used. So if I was going with the lace this way, I would want it right here because it needs to be sewn on that same stitching line. It can't be sewn higher up because that would close up our casing that we're inserting the ties through. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll put it on this way and stitch it right along there. And I think I'm only going to use this on the front side and not the back side. So let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll show you what it looks like when you start putting the ties through. Okay, I've gone ahead and stitched the lace along that front neckline edge, and I've gone ahead and I've stitched down the back neckline edge so that I've got casings on the front and the back. Finally, I did one more thing off camera, and that was that I took my double fold bias tape and I stitched it together along the folded edges to create one really long strap. Now, if you didn't want to use bias tape for this, you could also use ribbon, but this is going to be the tie that goes through the neckline. So I'm using 2 yards here because that gives you enough to go through the neckline and adjust it as you'd like, and also to make a long bow with tails on one shoulder. So to insert this, we're going to put a safety pin through one edge, and then we're just going to run that safety pin through, and the hardest part is the very beginning, but we're going to run this safety pin through the neckline edge to get the tie to come through the neckline. There we go. After you get that first little bit, it runs through much easier. The other hard part is the last end, and that's because sometimes you can get your safety pin stuck under the fold of the bias tape, so you just have to kind of work it around to make sure that you get it out. But this side is working pretty easily, so I'm just pulling it through there. Then I'm going to take the safety pin and I'm going to proceed to the next casing edge and go ahead and pull it through the front neckline. Okay, and once you get that all the way threaded through, then I like to go ahead and tie a knot on each end of the bias tape so it doesn't pull itself back through. And then finally, I see some threads that I missed clipping here. So let me chop those off. But you'll turn your top right side out at that point, and you want to adjust the neckline. So you want to make sure that there's an even amount of tie coming out on each shoulder. Okay. And then you'll want to use the ties to sort of gather the top in between them. And these can be adjusted to personal preference and taste, but you'll just want to get those ties to where you've got, see, I think that strap's still a little too long for me. Let me pull those a little bit. There we go, that looks better. So I'll adjust all of that, and then on this shoulder, these two ends get tied in a bow to complete the top. The only thing left to do after this is to go ahead and to hem, there we go, to hem the top. So to hem the top, you're just going to fold the bottom edge to the wrong side twice so that all those raw edges are inside, and then we're going to go ahead and stitch that. Okay, so here's my hem stitched out along the bottom. I've just folded that in, stitched it in place, and here is my top. Now I am going to add that if you happen to try to adapt this for a child, there are a lot of Consumer Product Safety Commission regulations about pajamas for children, and particularly about ties on any kind of clothing for children. So you do want to make sure that you Google CPSC and make sure you're complying with all of those things. You don't want things that are a choking hazard or things that are not flame retardant on a child. So make sure that you know all of those things before you attempt to adapt this for a child. But for an adult, here we go.